Hey, my name is Chelsea Marjada. This is Unit 4 Case Connections. So for my first case, I chose case number 1. So ammonia, although highly toxic, is a normal byproduct of the catabolism of amino acids and other nitrogen-containing compounds. So mainly the alpha amino acids, so that's ornithine, arginine, and citrulline. But in this case, we're going to talk about glutamine and alanine. So in normal human metabolism, the muscles generate the majority of the free amino acids in our bodies, which are then eventually processed through the urea cycle, which takes place in the liver, and then they are expelled from the body in our urine as non-toxic excess nitrogen. So, like I said before, glutamine and alanine are released by the muscles, and alanine is synthesized by the transamination of glucose-derived pyruvate. Glutamine is produced from glutamate by the addition of an amide to the glutamate carboxyl group by an ATP-dependent reaction catalyzed by glutamine synthetase. So the majority of glutamine is then converted to alanine in the digestive system as well as our kidneys. Alanine is also taken up by the liver, where it's used in hepatic gluconeogenesis. So that's to supply glucose for our body for energy. At the same time, glutamate dehydrogenase frees the ammonia from the alpha-ketoglutarate to then enter into the urea cycle. So glutamine can also either be catalyzed by the glutaminase synthetase to be synthesized into glutamate, or it's deaminated by glutaminase. Alanine aminotransferase then transaminates glutamate with pyruvate to generate alanine in addition to more alpha-ketoglutarate. Alanine is transported to the liver, where it undergoes another transamination to generate pyruvate, which is in turn used in gluconeogenesis again, which connects the fasting state gluconeogenesis to nitrogen transport, as we know that in the fasted state, the number one source of energy is hepatic glycogenolysis. So once entered into the urea cycle, the free ammonia couples with bicarbonate, which then forms carbamoyl phosphate via phosphorylation of bicarbonate and a reaction with the ammonium ion. Ornithine transcarbamylase then synthesizes citrulline, one of our main amino acids, from the carbamoyl phosphate and ornithine. Citrulline is condensed along with aspartate by argininosuccinate synthetase to create arginosuccinate. This is then cleaved by argininosuccinase to form fumarate and arginine. Finally, urea, this produces urea, and is passed into the blood where it's eventually disposed of by the kidneys in our urine, while the ornithine is regenerated from arginine by arginase. So as to the deficiency causing these symptoms of our patient, this is likely a result of ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency, which causes carbamoyl phosphate to build up within our cell's mitochondria, where in an attempt to maintain cellular balance, it gets directed into pyrimidine synthesis, which in turn produces those severely elevated levels of orotic acids in the urine. Carbamoyl phosphatase synthetase is not likely to be affected or deficient due to this, again, given those elevated levels of orotic acid, because they are necessary to synthesize orotic acid. Additionally, in individuals with ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency, arginine becomes essential because citrulline levels drop, so then arginine cannot be synthesized. Now onto my second case, I chose case number 4. So based on this patient's history, signs and symptoms, her exam findings, I feel that she's most likely suffering from a vitamin B12 deficiency. So normally when vitamin B12 is taken to our body via foods like meat, eggs, dairy, the acidic environment in our stomach and our GI tract releases the B12 from the protein that it made its way down in. And then when it's released from the protein, it's able to be absorbed. And once it absorbs in through the ileum, it gets bound by transcobalamin 1 until it makes its way a little further in where it's cleaved so that it can bind to intrinsic factor. The intrinsic factor allows it to be taken into the terminal ileum where it disassociates from the intrinsic factor to enter circulation. So at this point, it's now bound by transcobalamin 2 or heptachlorine, so that it can be delivered to either the liver or the peripheral tissues. Once it makes its way to the peripheral tissues, the vitamin B12 is able to be generated. So it needs to get in there to be able to generate more of it. And that happens in the cytosol. So then the cobalamin, or the vitamin B12, is used as a cofactor by methionine synthase to form methionine and tetrahydrofolate, which in turn allows the synthesis of purines and pyrimidines. So additionally, vitamin B12 is necessary for the conversion of methylmalonyl-CoA to succinyl-CoA. It's part of the Krebs cycle. And the patient's symptoms are characteristic of vitamin B12 deficiency, which typically manifests itself with hematological, gastrointestinal, and neurological signs and symptoms. This is because it is integral in the erythropoiesis and maintaining the myelin sheath on our nerves, as well as synthesizing DNA. However, some of her symptoms are similar to those seen in people with iron deficiency. So everybody knows someone with iron deficiency. A lot of people are anemic. They like to chew on ice. And that accompanies, when it is severe, it can have symptoms of shortness of breath, fatigue, tachycardia, and inflammation of the tongue, just like in our patient. Also, sometimes that can have some neurological symptoms, since it is involved in the synthesis of neurotransmitters as well. But given that the patient is suspected of suffering megaloblastic anemia, vitamin B12 is really the only answer from our list. On the other hand, if she were to be suffering from a vitamin B6 deficiency, that's more commonly associated with microcytic anemia, which symptoms of which don't really match our patient. So that would be dermatitis, scaling and cracked lips, swollen tongue, which we do have, but depression and confusion as well, which our patient does not have. So tests that I would run in order to differentiate from these diagnoses outside of just going by signs and symptoms would, I would run a red blood count to check for anemia. I would also do a blood smear to look at the state of the hemoglobin, the little cells, and I would check for levels of both vitamin B6 and B12. I could also do an antibody test for intrinsic factor, as well as a methylmalonic test to look for elevated levels of that, which would contribute to that, or point to a vitamin B12 deficiency.